Hello mate, my name's Gareth and welcome to Eno Wrestling. This video will be a little bit different from my usual AEW related content because today I'm going to be breaking down how stories work within the context of professional wrestling. This is the first in a series of 3 videos that I'm going to do on this topic. In this first video, we'll break down the fundamentals of storytelling, or to steal a phrase from wrestling itself, the 4 pillars of storytelling. In the second video, I'll go over the 10 key aspects of storytelling using Eddie Kingston vs CM Punk as a reference point and exploring how that works so perfectly as a story. And in the third video, I'll break down short-term, medium-term and long-term storytelling. On October 31st, I sent out this tweet asking what storytelling in wrestling means to you personally. I posted this tweet because I was interested to know what it was that invested different people in pro wrestling. Different people will find different things from the medium, and the responses I got certainly proved that. It was a near impossible task to summarise storytelling in one tweet, as it encapsulates so many different things. Look at me, I'm making a 3-part video series to explain it, and even then I'm missing things out. I've studied storytelling for over 9 years and I still have so much to learn, so asking people to summarise it in one tweet was always going to be a little bit unrealistic, but they can explain what it means to them individually. I'm hoping that you will learn something from this series of videos, but I also want you to remember throughout all of it what it is that makes you personally invest in pro wrestling. Just like any great wrestling promotion, the fundamentals of storytelling are built on 4 pillars, the 4 Ps: people, place, purpose and plot. You may already have a rough idea of how these translate, but let's dive deeper. People might be best described as characters. Think of them the way you would a character in any TV show or film. The purpose of a character is to connect to the audience. They are the vehicle for which we use to tell our story. They are the glue that brings an audience into a world, gives it meaning and engages us throughout the story. We live vicariously through characters in some way for the duration of the story, so they are arguably the most important part. This is why in wrestling we can sometimes forgive bad storytelling if we connect to the character enough. Just think about Daniel Bryan in WWE. Fans loved him and related to him so much that it really didn't matter what the story was. As long as it ended with him winning at WrestleMania, the fans were going to be happy. As it was, the storytelling was objectively awful. It was a mess, and that's because Bryan winning at WrestleMania was never the plan until very late in the day. But he was good enough as a character, he connected enough that he carried WWE to one of their greatest ever moments. Wrestling is like all forms of storytelling. We have good guys, bad guys, and the odd, ambiguous character here or there who can just fill any role that the story requires. It's not just the wrestlers who are the characters also, it's the commentators, managers, authority figures, if you want to have them, everyone. Even the fans at times can take on the role of a character. Look at Cody Rhodes' current character arc. The fans are an important aspect of his story, whatever that story is. Characters, or people, are how we connect to stories. We explore a journey of change with characters, and that is what makes storytelling what it is. Place is not simply a location, it's the entire world in which our story takes place, including the rules of that world and how it works. A story in WWE will be different to a similar story in New Japan or AEW, simply because of where it takes place. It will have a different context and it will have different consequences for the entire world. It is paramount to make your world feel authentic and not break the rules of your world. Otherwise, you seriously run the risk of losing your audience's suspension of disbelief, which is especially important in wrestling. For example, Brock Lesnar ignoring the rules of the Money in the Bank match and stealing the briefcase is world-breaking and objectively bad storytelling. There's no heat to be gained from doing this, all it does is confuses and disillusions the viewer, because you have broken the world in which your story takes place. Place is also things like a wrestler fighting in their hometown or at WrestleMania. A change in not only location, but also the setting of that location will give different context to the story being told. Would Kofi Kingston vs Daniel Bryan have the same context if it took place at Extreme Rules instead of WrestleMania? No. Would Bryan Danielson vs Kenny Omega have the same context if it was wrestled on a standard episode of Dynamite instead of Grand Slam? No. Whatever the place where our story occurs, it is paramount that it remains authentic to itself. That is the most important thing. That allows us as an audience to suspend our disbelief and engage with the characters and story. Even if the place is as wacky as Bray Wyatt's imagination, we can still suspend our disbelief as an audience if it makes sense to the character, the story, and if it's presented without breaking the world within which it exists. Purpose is vital for storytelling as it drives the character forward in the plot and it helps us as the audience apply meaning to what we're watching. Purpose for a character in the context of wrestling might be as simple as wins and losses. This is why AEW focused so much on the wins and losses matter mantra in the early days of the company, because they realised that a large reason why fans were no longer watching WWE anymore was because too much of it seemed like it didn't matter. However, purpose for a character might be deeper than simply wins and losses. For example, when Eddie Kingston faced CM Punk, Eddie openly admitted that he wasn't bothered about winning or losing, he only wanted to teach CM Punk a lesson. Character purpose is driven by motivations and objectives, which we'll explore in more detail in video 2. Purpose is why AEW fans weren't worried when Kenny Omega defeated Hangman the first time or even the second time in the 10-man tag match. Fans knew that Hangman would get his time and that his loss would only fuel him. This is exactly why Being the Elite titled episode 228 as Losses Matter Too, because purpose allows us to find meaning in everything that happens within a story. Every action, every result should matter to the wider story. If something doesn't really matter or doesn't have a purpose, then there is no reason for the audience to care or invest, and it isn't really part of that story. It isn't just purpose for a character which matters. We can also ask, what is the purpose for telling this story? What does the audience learn or gain from this story? In a wrestling context, we might tell a certain story to get someone over, we might tell a certain story to endear someone to the fans, or we might tell a certain story to get the audience to turn on a character. Hangman Adam Page's 2-year journey from failure to success wasn't just a rags to riches story that was there to entertain us. We can also learn from Hangman and apply it to our own lives. Not every story has to have that level of deeper purpose, it's fine to just tell stories that allow us to escape. But, whatever story you're telling, it needs to have a purpose, and if it doesn't, then it won't register as a story, it'll just be an anecdote or a series of events. Plot is effectively the structure of the story. We'll talk in more detail about short, medium and long-term storytelling in the third video of this series, but whatever type of story you're telling, it will follow a structure, which is the plot. Story structure in wrestling isn't as defined as what it would be in TV or film, but it still follows the general rules of storytelling, which are most simply defined by Dan Harmon in his Story Circle. At first, the character exists in their world, but they want something. They enter an unfamiliar situation with the aim of getting what they want. They adapt to that unfamiliar situation before they get what they want. They then pay a heavy price for it before they return to a familiar situation, and then they show that they have changed over their journey, whether successful or not. This is the basic story structure which every story follows. Of course, they're always going to be more complex and detailed than that, but every story is nuanced in its own way, so it's impossible to sum it up more simply than those 8 basic story beats. This story structure will exist within a wrestling match itself, as well as in year-spanning character arcs. Whether it's a short, medium or long-term story, it will follow this basic plot structure. The purpose of plot is to keep the audience engaged. It's the glue that holds everything together. Plot are the actions taken, events that occur, the twists and turns within the story. Putting these 4 pillars of storytelling together, we arrive at the basic answer to the question from my tweet. People connect the audience to the story. Place grounds those people in an authentic world which allows the audience to invest. Purpose provides the characters and the audience with meaning for the story, and plot provides engagement for the audience and a journey for the character which allows them to change. To put it as simply as possible, storytelling is the journey of change within a character. That's what storytelling is for film, TV, novels, theatre, and that's what storytelling is within the context of pro wrestling. Despite presenting as if it's a sport, wrestling is driven by the same mechanics of storytelling that drives film and TV. Pro wrestling is such a unique storytelling medium because it combines the art of story with the presentation of sport, which makes for a form of entertainment that is completely unlike anything else. Like I said earlier though, there's so much more depth we can delve to within storytelling in wrestling, and that's exactly what we're going to do over the coming weeks. Exploring the 10 key aspects of storytelling in the context of pro wrestling next, and then breaking down short, medium and long-term storytelling in the third video. Beyond that, I will keep analysing stories from wrestling, most specifically AEW, so keep an eye out for those also. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed, as it really helps me out, and subscribe for more videos like this and other content based around AEW. Cheers mate!